great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Dr. Patricia A. Newton. She is someone who I have looked up to my entire professional life. She is a consummate leader, healer, and teacher whose influence on me personally has been tremendous ever since I came to Johns Hopkins as a little green psychiatry resident in 1980, and she took me under her wing. I'm not going to read her bio because that is before you in the program, but instead to give you some perspectives about Dr. Newton and the great work that she has done in Baltimore, our nation, and around the world. Dr. Newton has been educated in some of the premier institutions in this country, including Washington University in St. Louis and Johns Hopkins here in Baltimore, and she has woven together what she has learned into a fine and rare tapestry of psychiatry, public health, neuroscience, complementary medicine, and the history of the African diaspora. She applied her knowledge and was an innovator and builder of programs and services at Providence Hospital in Baltimore. Some of you remember Providence Hospital. While there, she encouraged people with mental illness to channel their experiences of trauma into dramatic expression through a theatrical production called Cooling the Fires of Hell Our Way. She was a pioneer on the cutting edge of using acupuncture to treat pain and addiction. Her leadership as executive director of the Black Psychiatrists of America has brought that organization to new heights through the grooming of young psychiatrist leaders. Her entrepreneurship in educational travel and event planning has led to conscious convenings for people around the world. Her collaborations span continents, from Romania to India to the Caribbean to Egypt and throughout Africa and beyond. If all of that were not enough, she has been on the forefront of calling attention to the issue of human trafficking and has played an important role in improving the response of FEMA to the needs of the African American community in times of disaster. On top of all of that, she had the audacity to go on Capitol Hill and call out certain politicians as psychopaths in suits. I have been witness to her actions and achievements and remain awed by Dr. Newton's brilliance as a leader, a change agent, an advocate, a mentor, a queen, and a king. So without further delay, will you please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Patricia A. Newton.
I want you to give yourselves a big round of applause for being here and looking so wonderful. Secondly, I'd like to see our great senator has just walked in. How you doing, Senator Pulliam? I'm just saying, how are you? Thank you, thank you. And I want to thank the board of the Black Mental Health Alliance and Sister Jan Desper for all the hard work that they do. I know your hands may be hurting, but clap again, please. First, I'm very honored and humbled to be able to present. Second of all, they're going to snatch me off this podium because the program says I have 20 minutes. She says I have 30, and everybody that knows me probably figures I'll take 45. So when what's the guy on the clown that does on Apollo? What's his name? Yeah, probably somebody's gonna come up and do that. I'd like to start out because this is a critical topic. How are the children? In the context of that statement or that question, among the Maasai, what is meant by that is that if the children are well, the community is well. That is what it implies, which is why people with or without children will answer the children are fine, because no matter what, in African traditional societies, the children and the elderly have to be kept well. unlike in Western society where neither one of those groups count, and the children don't vote, so nobody cares. And so let me just start out. You know, some of you have heard me speak before, some of you have heard this poem that I'm going to say before, but I wanted to do it to set the tone, and everybody knows that I walk around anyway, so. But in 2000, when I took a group to Senegal, it was New Year's Day, I'll never forget, and we went at night. And the Atlantic Ocean at night is very, very cold, and we had gone to the slave dungeon, and I had a panic attack. I'm a psychiatrist. I had a panic attack because I had never gone at night before. And as we got to the dungeon and the shadows started going against the walls and reflecting, I had to leave the group. And I couldn't permit the students and faculty that were with me to know that the psychiatrist was having a moment. And so I went out to the dock and I started writing. And I'm always laughing that I can't write when I live in America because the weight of oppression and racism and dehumanization is so heavy that I'm always like you, just trying to survive. And so I write best when I'm not in America. And so part of that issue is a poem I've heard, some of you have heard me say it before, but I know I'm going to take the time, but I got to do this because I think it sets the tone for what we are about to discuss. And it is called I Wonder. It says, I wonder, I really, really wonder. I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folk like we were stolen and taken across the sea to far away and distant places, beaten and chained in God-forsaken spaces, raped and castrated without any traces by those with strange names and whose alien faces can still be found today amongst all the races. I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could have two eyes, but still not see. The pain and misery of days gone by, still casting its spell and weaving its web and telling its lie in the hearts and minds and souls of those of us who lost our names, but we did not die. Mercy, oh mercy, above the ocean's roar. Can't you hear the ancestors cry? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could still bow our heads on bended knee and ask for forgiveness of their great sins, while the guilty ones continue to grin and make new slave ships to put us in, by age, by sex, religion, and color of skin, creating new deaths from without and within. Oh, Lord, my God, when will it end? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could dance and shout with such delight and glee while we walk that walk and talk that talk, just like the man you see. But should a sister or a brother stumble and fall, won't stop long enough to help a hand at all. Turning a deaf eye. Let's have a party. Let's go get high. Start some new world wars. Throw a few games of balls. Mercy. Oh, mercy. Above the ocean's roar, don't you hear the ancestors call? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could take from scratch and make every imaginable recipe and be the best at whatever we see. But through all this death, destruction, and debauchery, we still don't know yet quite how to be free. I wonder. I really, really wonder. Thank you. Appreciate your indulgence. Before I start, I always have to recommend things. I have a tour going to Ghana. Use this as a promotional opportunity this year. And the Black Psychiatrists of America will be handling their 38th Transcultural Psychiatry Conference in New Delhi, India. So if you all want to talk to me about that. I have some cards. Please do. Baltimore, we'd love to have you join us. I want to dedicate this lecture to a well-known psychiatrist. Does anybody know who that is? Who is it? Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who is the reason that I became a psychiatrist. I was on my way to being a surgeon, went to see her in her senior year, and as I was leaving after an hour, she said, "Oh, I know we'll see you in psychiatry next year." I said, "No, ma'am, I'm going to be a surgeon." She said, "Oh, no, my dear, you're a thinker, not a cutter." And the rest is history. I want to start with this, and I'm going to try to get through this in 15 minutes, but this is a critical piece you need to read. It was in the Baltimore Evening Sun in 1920. As democracy is perfected, the office of the president represents more and more closely the inner soul of the people. On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last. And the White House will be occupied by a downright fool and a complete narcissistic moron. I didn't say that. Macon said that in 1920. So don't go out of here and say Dr. Newton said anything. I'm just quoting as the man just said, okay? And there is a Bible that was found in ancient Kemet years ago. It was called the Nag Hammadi Bible. And in it, chapter 17, verse 10, I'd like to read a quote. "Ignorance brought about anguish and terror, and the anguish grew solid like a fog, and no one was able to see." No one is able to see. And so let us not leave there as we bring in the racism. This is Lyndon Baines Johnson, and what he said was, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you picking his pocket. He'll give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pocket for you. Circa United States of America, 2017. This is what we are, and this is the status. So how are the children? What are the effects of racism? First of all, our children are more likely to be given harsher discipline than white children in school. We now know the data is 6 times more likely to be suspended for African American girls and 3 times more likely for African American boys. And some statistics that just came out last week, New York City is suspending their African American girls or girls of color 10 times more than the white students. How are the children? Minority children with disabilities are 25% more likely to be expelled. And finally, our children are more likely to be perceived as being older than they are, and therefore more responsible than they should be. There was a great study done at the University of California with college students where they put black children and white children of the same age next to each other and asked them to identify which one was the oldest. And in every situation, the African American child was given an age older than what they were. And our children are being victimized and harassed in schools by police, by Head Start teachers. I just saw an article where a 4-year-old was dragged out of the classroom by a white teacher. Now, that's not to say that white teachers can't teach our children, but it is to say that our children are being subjected to this so-called unconscious bias that creates a scenario that assists in the school-to-prison pipeline. We just call it the way it is. Because the violence for our children and the trauma for our children is in every major institution, from home to the community to the school. Are you with me now? Our children are being conditioned and socialized for jail. So that's how the children are. And what are some of the media effects? Now we got cereal that's called Booty-O's. Listen, this is what your children are eating. And now we have books coming out that teach abortion, and you don't see any white children on this children's book. What you see is only black and brown children, showing that the population needs to be controlled. Are you all with me now? I just want to make sure we're on the same page up in this institution. And so what happens with racism, we have certain portions of the brain that get most affected. And of course the limbic system, and we ended up with violence, and we end up seeing trauma in every aspect of our lives. In Baltimore City as well as in America, our major institutions do not protect our children. The home does not protect them. The schools do not protect them, and yes, the churches do not protect them. And our children are abused and sexually molested and traumatized in ways that are unconscionable, and exposed to behaviors and exposed to aberrancies that no child should have to endure. In other words, their childhood is being denied. And because it's being denied, as a result of that, you're getting a distortion. And the data and all the research is not looking at our children, except more recently now that we have this so-called trauma-informed care, which many of us have been dealing with ever since we've been practicing, Dr. Pram, you know. We've been dealing with trauma since the beginning. And so part of the issue is that these systems within our bodies are being affected, and at a very, very early age, causing major changes in the neurological and neuropsychological development of our children, so that we have, let me back up, so that we see all of these kinds of effects that affect what we call the mirror neurons, where mirror neurons are where you have your empathy, so that empathy becomes a passé within the American culture. We have bullies in high positions so that we don't have to deal with having empathy, so that as in the African system where the elderly and the children are protected, they don't count. And as a result of that, the mirror neuron system is working in conjunction with the red nucleus of the brain, where everything that happens to you is layered. And so that oftentimes it's like an onion skin. And you may not know why you're acting a fool. And it may be because of some early traumatic experiences. Or it may be you just a fool anyway, and so it doesn't really matter. Excuse me, I'm not trying to get personal. And so part of what happens with our people, if we look at trauma, from early childhood traumatic effects, leads to, as the doctor said earlier, leads to earlier death. And so part of the issue is like the pyramid hierarchy of trauma. And that traumatic effect has an adverse on every organ system in your body. Not just in your brain, but also cardiac system, GI system. We know that trauma causes certain biological changes where you have brain atrophy, where the brain gets smaller, and it's not able to do what you need to get to do. So some of your people cannot help themselves because they can't. They've been traumatized. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if we have been traumatized for over 400 years, something has happened. And even though we're the survivors and have the luxury of this wonderful intellectual discourse, it's at a cost. And we're paying at a cost. And the question becomes, at what cost do we sit in this room as we deal with the realities of discrimination, dehumanization, living in environments that are toxic, sleeping with people that are toxic, hello, making life choices that are toxic, eating foods and from food deserts in our community that are toxic. All of these have a cumulative effect, and it's not just linear. It is not a linear effect. And so that we are traumatized every day. There's no, I have a book that I'm redoing called Post-Traumatic Slavery Disorder, not Syndrome Disorder. And part of that issue is that we are in trauma every day. we're constantly being traumatized. So the brain never gets the opportunity in the body to rest. So we have compound, complex trauma. In addition to that, we know that racism and discrimination lead to traumatic effects. And so there's never a time when you can rest. You're never at peace. And so it affects ourselves and our relationships and our family dynamics. And when we look at our children's brain, we know that these cumulative effects are not going to go fast. But if I want to really convince you that you're nothing and that you don't count, I start when you're young, because it takes less energy to do that. And then as we get older, it takes more energy because you get more set in your ways. So it is no mistake that the trauma is designed and the misinformation and the media is designed to affect the young people, because you're too old to change. But they are confused, and they're confused because we have not been giving clarity ourselves. You know, I'm convinced that we have these so-called rites of passage programs for children. We need rites of passage programs for adults, because many adults do not know what their role are. You know, they are dirty old men and women because they were dirty young men and women. And they didn't understand what it means to be an ancestor or to be an adult or to be a senior in the community. They just old. They old and ignorant, but they're not anybody you should look up to. So we have to demand that that changes for our young people. And so our children have no hope. They have no future. And so they don't see themselves as getting a job. And when they do get a job, and we need to stop training our children just to be worker bees. We need to start training, as part of the model for healing is more entrepreneurship among our children. Creating jobs for ourselves. You don't expect, Dr. John Henry Clark said, you never expect powerful people to teach powerless people how to gain power. And why should they? Because there is something inherent in the American society where they talk, all you do, black people do, is talk about racism. Well, there is this thing called color blindness, where nobody sees their superior, their privilege as white. Because all you have to do is work hard and get an education. I believe in that myth. I probably have more degrees than most people in this room. But having said that, it doesn't change the reality that the color of one's skin, the 5 degrees of melanin, 5%, do make a difference. But what I want to show you is the intergenerational transmission of these behaviors. And so the data now shows, Richard Yehuda and other folk up in New York have talked about the fact that the behaviors that get layered down and the experiences that we have related to our red nucleus and related to our mirror neurons can be transmitted to the next generation. So you stupid, your children become stupid. I'm not getting personal, just saying, you know. But, oh goodness. And so that what happens is that we have intergenerational transmission of the behaviors and the coping mechanisms. I have patients who come in my office and they scream. I mean, they just be yelling. I'm like, we are not outside. My mother used to say, use your inside voice. And I said, well, why are y'all yelling? I think they're angry with each other. Why are y'all yelling? We're not yelling. They just are used to being loud, and their children are loud. And what I'm saying all this to say is, even in little bitty things, from diet to behaviors to coping mechanisms, we sometimes pass that on. And some of it is genetic, some of it is adaptational, and a lot of it is a combination thereof. And so we have to be very careful about what we input. It's not just the mother's uterus, but the data supports that men who are subjected to trauma also have changes and alterations within the RNA of their sperms. So they're transmitting that to their children as well. And no, I'm not giving you a whole bunch of statistics. I'm just giving you the reality. You can read the statistics. Everybody in here is intelligent, and I have 5 minutes. So, as a result of this trauma, we see these comorbid conditions, substance abuse and substance use disorders, PTSD, and affective disorders. And there are brain changes that occur as a result of those. And what do we do as a result of those? As African people, we have problems with money. Melanin and money. First of all, we don't have enough money to do anything. And then when we do get it, we're gambling. We keep the casinos. You know that MGM Grand has been making $47 million a month since it opened. And that money is not coming from outside the region. Hello? And so we're essentially in debt. And as a result of that, we can't get loans, but we may not be able to get loans anyway, but we have never looked at how we can create wealth within our own communities. And we do dumb stuff like this. Go take out a loan for a weave. This is the kind of dumb stuff we do as a result of that. I'm almost done. We can cut the questions down, but I got to get through this. This is what happens when you are stuck on stupid. This is trauma. This is the effects of trauma. Okay. And so what do? We throw up our hands and give it to the Lord. But I was raised in a family and taught when I was going to Sunday school that God helps those who what? So we're not even fulfilling the mission of the Lord. Here we go. I don't care what your religion is. Everybody knows that in nature, if you don't take care of yourself, you're supposed to be destroyed. That's the law of nature. That which cannot take care of itself should not survive. Mercy. And so everybody else is telling you that, but you're just not listening. And there it is, written by Emerson. Nature has made up its mind that what cannot defend itself will not be defended. And you want somebody else to take care of you. That's a slave mentality. So what we talk about are our options. The first thing we need to do, people, is realize we're in a war. So to be in denial of that is to be, as I said, stuck on stupid. And so that stuck on stupid is the result of a coping mechanism that is maladaptive. You don't want to feel pain, so you deny that the reality in which you find yourself exists. And so we have to develop war strategies. And war strategies are not just about combative. It's about creating advocacy groups that will demand that we have proper food and nutrition and places within our community, that we stop giving our children this toxic stuff to eat, that we read the labels, and we demand that we live in environments that are lead-free, and we demand that our children stop being sexually abused and physically abused. You can demand that, and I'm almost done. And if you don't demand that, then you get what you deserve. Okay? We rewire our neural networks. Let me show you how to quickly rewire your neural network. I want everybody here to speak to somebody else and just say hi to them. Just say hello and speak, and okay. Okay, that's enough. Now I want you to act as though you're at your family with a family reunion and really act like you're really glad to see these people. Let's do that right quick. All right, that's too much loving. Now, that took all of 30 seconds. What you just did was rewire your neural network. You changed the reality, and it changed your behavior. Am I right or wrong? And it didn't require anything. So what we have to do is think in terms of our own survival and not everybody else's, and we can rewire our neural network. And it doesn't take a lot, and it's free, by the way. And then you can understand your history and culture. The statistics support that young people who are exposed to their history and culture do not enter the juvenile justice system. I'll give you a classic example, and I'm almost done. Y'all just have to take 10 minutes to questions instead of 15. is that with these children that we take to Africa all the time, we make them find a way to pay $300. That's it. And we, through the foundation, and we love donations, through the foundation, do that. Now, we took a young man to Ghana about maybe 6 years ago. And he came with his grandmother. And once we were early getting in the hotel, so the rooms weren't ready. So he finds out that there's no drinking age in Ghana. So he sachets at 15 up to the bar and orders a beer. His grandmother almost had a heart attack. And she said, I'm sending him back. I said, no, ma'am, Miss Margaret, do not send him back. If he's still stupid at the end of the week, I'll help you send him back. So we took him to meet the family of Yah Asentawa. Do anybody know who Yah Asentawa is? Excuse me? Who is she? Was she? She was the queen mother who fought the British for the golden stool. When the British asked for the golden stool, and the chiefs were debating, she grabbed the women, they took up arms and began fighting. So we took them to meet their families, and then as you know, I am both a chief and a queen mother in Ghana with a village of 40,000 people, and I take them to my village. The first thing we do is change their name. We give them an African name based upon, their birth and all of that. Because what you name your child is critical. And Lala Shante don't get you nowhere in a job. Okay, so let's just talk about that. And so we change their name, and then we give them these experiences. And of course, as a chief, they're my guests, so they're coming behind me. And I say, you do what I do, but don't speak to me when I'm sitting in state, because you cannot talk to a chief directly. I have an Ochami, which is a linguist. You speak to him, he speaks to me. I speak to him, he speaks to you. Why is that? That's to keep the chief from looking like an idiot at times. And so that everything looks good. And the umbrella goes up, and the band, and my drummers came, and my soldiers came and started pushing the kids back. So when it was over, the young man who had been creating all kinds of difficulty during the time, so somebody said, Maurice, how did you like today? He said, I have been with kings. This is a young man that came to Session into the bar for the drink. I have been with kings and queens. Do you think I'm going back on Pennsylvania Avenue and hang out with them yos? What am I saying? Because you have to expose your children to the kinds of environmental things that nurture them and make them grow. And so you promote and maintain the health that way. And so what I call is, these are talking about how we're going to close, is the issues of what I think will be successful for keeping the children okay. The first thing is the 7 Ds, I call the Newton 7 Ds of African people, survival and thriving. First of all, you have to have the desire. You got to want to be healthy. You got to want to be a survivor. You got to want to take care of your children. Second, you have an obligation and duty as adults and parents to do that, or you shouldn't have children. Thirdly, you have to be dependable. If you tell me you're going to do something, don't tell me you're going to try, because the brain does not register try. It only registers doing it and not doing it. Try is a word that created in the English language, does not exist in any other language. It is only for the right side of the brain to make the right side of the brain feel good. It doesn't cross to the left side of the brain in the corpus callosum. In other words, it's a mental masturbatory word. It makes you feel good, but it ain't the real thing. You have to be diligent. That means that I have to not only depend on you, but you have to be willing to persevere. I'm almost at the end, Jan. And you have to be dependent. You cannot have a successful community, a successful family, a successful people of African descent if you don't know how to protect it. And you don't know how to defend it. And defending is not only just bearing arms if you have to, pray you don't, but it's also looking at an optimistic and positive approach to your environment and to create opportunities and to not allow yourself to be caught up in thinking that that's what it's supposed to be, that it's only what the white folks want and you don't have the ability to do nothing. That's passivity. You have to have dollars. Notice I ain't leaving out the money, because money affords you a choice. You don't have a choice if you're broke. And so what I'm going to suggest is we begin to think differently about money. I had a group of welfare mothers who talk about they can get their children to go to the Smithsonian and other kinds of things that the other schools were going. I'm looking at my sisters. My sisters got on $200 tennis shoes. My sisters got nails done. I ain't getting personal. I'm just saying where your priorities are. And I said to them, I offer you a challenge. Every one of you women, I want you to put $1 a week into the kitty. We're looking at 2 groups of 20 women. That's $40 a week. And I want you to compound that interest. And I want you not to taste just money. And at the end of 2 years, I want you to see how much money you have compounded interest so you can take your children where they need to go. It's a matter of repriorities and reworking the neural networks. Are you with me now? And you don't prioritize that, you don't get that. And then, of course, you have to be devoted. You have to love your people. I know some of us act in ways that are not loving. And I know sometimes we need to shake them up. But loving your people means doing what Christ did. He kicked the money changers out of the temple. And what that means is that when you see wrong, you have a Maatian duty to speak up. And I'll talk about what Maat is, and that is Maat. Maat was the ancient ethical moral symbol before there was Christianity, before there was religion, and before there was the Jewish prudence system. Maat was an ethical system that everybody that lived had to live by. It's truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, order, duty, reciprocity. Because believe me, what goes around does come around and get you back. And so we have an obligation. The whole concept of God came from the African consciousness. There was nobody else on earth then but us. And so we have an obligation to fulfill that mission. And when we are judged, which is the judgment scene, against our heart is weighed against the feather of truth, and the feather of truth is Maat. And Maat feather was a woman. It's projected as a woman with outstretched wings. But it's an ostrich feather. And I'm done. My time has expired. And so this ostrich feather is because the ostrich can turn its head 360 degrees. And so it can judge from all directions. And so what am I saying? How are the children? The children have to be fine. We have to love them. We have to protect them. We have to do what is right by them. And I thank you very much. May God be satisfied. We don't have to have any questions, but anyway.
Well, we have time for Jan?
Yeah, can we take one or two?
One question. Okay.
Really quick. And just please make sure your question is a question.
I'm sorry, Dean. I took
Dr. Newton, thanks in no small part to you and Dr. John Henry Clark and Tony Browder. I am CEO of Maat Enterprises.
Oh, praise God.
I'm a local resource who can provide information on Maat that you began. I have a rites of passage program for adults. My question for you is, I am launching an effort to have racism declared as extreme racism, declared as an extreme mental illness in the DSM. Mm-hmm. Working with professionals to make it happen and a grassroots groundswell so we can meet in the middle. I'd like to ask your opinion about that effort.
Well, and I'm sure Dr. Prim can concur with me, we in the Black Psychiatrists of America have been attempting for the last 25 years to have racism put in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, as a mental disorder. And of course, that's been met with a great deal of resistance. It is a mental disorder. It is a delusional disorder. and it should be treated as such. Whether or not the DSM reflects it is irrelevant in the diagnosis and treatment of our patients.
Thank you. I just want to first say thank you. And my question is with regard to what you were talking about, the neurological effects of trauma. Working in juvenile justice, I do forensic evaluation, so all I do is assess people all day. And so we see the data in the test results, the IQ test and the DCAFs, the executive functioning and things like that. My question is, how do we incorporate, or do you believe we should incorporate, neurofeedback, cognitive rehabilitation, and executive function coaching within these institutions where we're working with young African-American children who literally cannot sustain attention, and I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, this is just what it is. Sustained attention, impulse control, inhibition, and mental flexibility. I don't care what kind of cognitive behavioral therapy I'm trying to do. If you can't think, you can't hear me. And if you can't focus, you can't retain anything.
Well, the answer to your question is yes, it needs to be incorporated, but it also needs to be incorporated amongst the providers as well who don't know what they're doing in terms of understanding that. But let me back up one further. At the time that you are conceiving, you need to be pure and clean and not doing things that will cause these children to have the kinds of neurocognitive developmental issues superimposed upon a racist environment. Yeah, fetal alcohol syndrome and other stuff, yes. Is that it?
That was amazing. Some of it I knew, a lot of it I didn't. I'm a teacher, and I just need to follow you. Like, do you have social media? I can. That's really it.
I'll give you my card.
Yeah.
You know, every time I do social media, I get as much fan mail as I do criticism.
Oh.
So I stopped reading most of my social media. But I will
I
give
just wanna
you
keep up,
information,
that's all.
and you can stay in touch. And
Yes.
I would like to be able to get as much information from the people here so that I can create a network of you all who will begin to develop advocacy to approach these politicians, to approach, you know, we don't all have blessed with good people like Senator Shirley Nathan Pulliam and Ben Cardin. So we have to begin to educate our community to advocate for our survival.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and I appreciate, Jan, you letting me have those extra moments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Newton. Nana.